First of all, thank you everyone for coming over. I understand this is 1 p.m. on Thursday, a few hours away from closing TechEd 2011. So hopefully everyone has had a very wonderful, productive TechEd session so far. So let's get started. The topic for this session is Windows Azure Virtual Network. So what is it? Basically, it's a new pillar. It's a networking pillar added to the Windows Azure platform. So as folks know, the Windows Azure platform has a few core services, like a compute, storage, and a database. And the virtual network is basically the network pillar added to this platform. So it enables a bunch of new scenarios and also broadened existing scenarios that can be delivered on this platform. It consists a list of network services. There are a few of them. The first one is Windows Azure Connect. This is the first service online under Windows Azure Virtual Network. Essentially, it enables the cross-premise connectivity. So think that as my application and the service running in Windows Azure need a secure connection back to my on-premises database, line of business server. To enable that hybrid scenario, folks need to use Windows Azure Connect. So I will be talking about mostly on Windows Azure Connect in this presentation. But before I do, I also want to mention some other services under Windows Azure Virtual Network. The first one is called Global Traffic Manager. That's a new service, just came online 6 weeks ago, maybe. Essentially, that is a load balancing solution that enables the distribution of incoming traffic to different hosted service in your Windows Azure subscription based on your policy. So for example, if you say you want a performance-based policy, then think about scenario. Let's say I am in Hong Kong, I'm accessing a web page. Then the traffic manager would be smart enough to route me to the Azure presence of your hosted service instead of routing me all the way to United States. So traffic manager detects and route you to the site which it thinks has the minimized latency. Another example would be if you author a failover policy, then if your primary service is down, then the traffic manager can route you smartly to the secondary service which is available. So that's something folks can try right now. It's offered as a CTP. If you log into Windows Azure portal, you can go there, request CTP access, and within, let's say, less than 7 days, your request should be approved, and you should be able to play with either Windows Azure Connect or Global Traffic Manager. I want to touch on another service. It's called a Data Center Network Virtualization. It's something not available yet, but something we are working on. It's on our roadmap and hopefully can deliver very soon. Essentially, that is the technology enable you to extend your corporate network to Windows Azure. So for example, you can define your own network, your IP address range, or a subnet in Windows Azure. Then all the Azure row and the VM instance, when they come up, they will pick the IP address from that address pool you define in Windows Azure. So in that way, you can manage that network, although it's in Windows Azure, the same way you manage your own network lives in your own CorpNet. And there are a bunch of new scenarios can be enabled using that technology. Okay, so what is the objectives and overview for this presentation? So as I said, I will focus mostly on Windows Azure Connect. And I think the core message I want to deliver to you guys about Windows Azure Connect is it enables Azure customer to more easily write, build, and deploy hybrid style cloud computing application. By hybrid, I mean distributed style cloud computing service. So you have portion of your application running in Windows Azure and another portion running outside Windows Azure, and most likely in your own data center or on premises. And with Azure Connect, it provides a virtual network bridge, if you will, to connect the two pieces together in a very secure and simple manner. And with Azure Connect, it really helps customer to ease the migration process, ease the migration of your application to Windows Azure. I will be going over the key features and the capability of Windows Azure Connect. I'll be talking about how to set it up and how to manage it. I will talk about the scenarios and the use cases for Windows Azure Connect. And at the end, I will do a little demo to highlight some of the use cases and scenario mentioned in the presentation, and hopefully also give folks a feel how easy it is to use Windows Azure Connect. So actually, before I dive in, let's show a hand. How many folks have heard Windows Azure Connect? It's about 40%. How many folks are actually using it? 0. Okay. So hopefully after this presentation, I can generate some interest for folks to go onto Windows Azure portal, request CTP access, and try it out. It's really very, very simple to use. So let's continue. So introducing Windows Azure Connect. As I said, essentially it connects the cloud, in this case is Windows Azure, to the on-premises data resources or IT resources. And the Connect really provides a low-level connection. It sits at IP level, so it's a true network connection, sort of linked the two pieces together, the cloud piece and on-premise piece. And since it's at IP level, so if your application is talking TCP or UDP or even ICMP, it should just work using the Azure Connect tunnel. So what is the customer benefits? What's the motivation? What's the point of using Windows Azure Connect? So as we talk to customer about moving their application to Windows Azure, we quickly realize it's not a full package deal. It's not something customer can say, let me forklift everything and just dump to Windows Azure. It's not that simple, right? For many, many valid reasons. One reason could be I have invested over the years in my infrastructure, and my application need to leverage those infrastructure on premises. Another reason would be, hey, I'm writing a new application, right? But my data, my customer data needs to stay on premises, and I have SQL Server that I must use. I'm not ready to move it to a SQL Azure yet. I still want my existing on-premise SQL Server. And then my application needs to talk to my SQL Server. Although my application, maybe it's a good fit to move to Azure because it provides scalability, failover, load balancing, all that kind of stuff. And another driving fact is compliance or regulatory reasons, right? Maybe governed by law. I must have some of customer data on premises. I must have some of my component in some geolocation by government laws, just for security concern or safety concern. So what that means is it creates a need for hybrid distributed style application. And that's why we provide Windows Azure Connect to fill that gap, to provide this virtual network bridge to connect the two pieces together. And we have simplicity in mind. We want developers and IT pros to focus on their application, not infrastructure. So as you will see later, the Azure Connect is very easy to use. It does not require you to have any kind of network knowledge. You don't have to understand IPsec, certificate, firewall, none of those things. And it has zero touch on your existing infrastructure. So you don't have to change your Azure firewall. You don't have, configure your router, anything. It should just simply set up, very simple to manage. After it's configured, the two pieces can talk to each other as if they are on the same LAN. Azure Connect is available as a CTP, which is technology preview, since last December. So it's been there for like 5 months. Folks can just log on to Windows Azure portal and request access and try it out. During the CTP period, everything is free. So it's also another good reason to try it out. So before I dive further, I want to put Azure Connect in context with other connectivity technologies that Microsoft has. So at the very top, you have the SQL Azure data synchronization. You can think that as a connectivity technology at the data layer. So essentially, it synchronizes the SQL Azure database with the SQL Server on premises. The next level down, you have Service Bus or App Fabric. So you can think that as a connectivity technology at application layer. So for example, if I have a WCF service, I want my customer or partner to use that service. The machine, the server, let's say, is behind a firewall on that device. So how do I publish that service so the customer outside my company boundary can actually access this WCF service? Then use the Service Bus or App Fabric technology. You should be able to publish that WCF endpoint so your customer and partner can reach in to access that endpoint. The next level down, you have a set of federated identity technology or access control technology Microsoft has. So essentially, they give you the ability to do single sign-on or reuse your existing Active Directory user identity on the cloud application. Then at the bottom of layer, as you see in the picture here, at network level or at machine level comes Windows Azure Connect. Right? So you can think that Connect basically gives you a link between the cloud infrastructure and your on-premise infrastructure. Once they are securely connected, your cloud should feel like a natural extension of your on-premise presence. So let's take a closer look at Windows Azure Connect. So how do I go about using it? All right. So at a very high level, to be able to use Windows Azure Connect, you need to perform three very simple steps. Okay, the first step is I have a bunch of Azure roles, and you need to identify which of those Azure roles need to have external connectivity or needs to be accessed by resources outside Windows Azure. Once you identify those roles, you can enable Azure Connect for those Azure roles. And you do that through a service model. Are folks familiar with service model? So essentially that's the CS dev file and the CS CFG file through which you define the Azure role behavior and the VM behavior. For example, I want to say this role coming up need 3 instances, or 3 small instances. Now that role come up need 5 large instances. Or I can say things like, I need to run a startup script after the machine come up. Or I want to open, TCP port, 1253 on a specific VM. So basically, the service model is the interface for you to configure the behavior of the Azure role and VM instances. So through the same service model, you enable Azure Connect. It's one line of XML tag. You basically say, enable Azure Connect for this role. And the second step is you have to do the same thing for your local machines. So you need to identify which machine need to be accessed by the Azure machine. And you need to enable Connect on those machines as well. And the way to do that is you have to install a little piece of software, what we call the Connect agent, on those local machines. And it's a one-click install. It's 0 configuration. The install doesn't ask you any question. And once you install, there's no further configuration. It just sits there doing its job. So after you've done the first 2 steps, now your Azure role enabled for Connect and your local machines are enabled for Connect. What's happened is if you go to the Windows Azure portal, you go to the Virtual Network tab in the navigation pane, and from there you can get into the admin UI of Windows Azure Connect. And in the admin UI, you should be able to see all the Connect-enabled roles and the Connect-enabled local machines. Then you just need to express your connectivity intent among those Connect endpoints. So for example, let's say, look at this diagram here, right? So let's say I have a web service. It has 3 roles, role A, role B, and role C. Role A doesn't need any external connectivity. But role B needs to connect to 2 SQL Server machines, right? And role C needs to connect to the developer machines. So in this case, in the step number 1, you enabled Connect for role B and a Connect for role C. And you installed Connect agent on your database machines and on your developer machines. And one of the developer machines can be even roaming. And you see those Connect endpoints on your admin UI. So what you need to do is you just create a local machine group. You put your develop group into that, let's say, dev machine group. Then you put your SQL Server machines into, say, database group. Then after that, you just make a link. You say the dev machine should connect to role C, and the role B should connect to database machine. And that's all. That's all you need to configure. That's all you need to express in the admin UI. And nowhere should you see IPsec or certificate or IPv6 or virtual network. So all the low-level stuff should be transparent to you. We will set that up for you automatically. So after you set up those policies, behind the scene, those agents on the Azure VM machine and agent on the local machine will retrieve the network policy that you configured in the admin UI. And then we basically bring the machine into that virtual network overlay so that they can start communicate with each other. So there are a few things to call out. The only requirement for the machine to be able to participate in connection is outgoing HTTPS. So for those machines, like the database machine or developer machines, most likely they are not public facing. They're behind the firewalls and behind the NAT device. So as long as those machines has outgoing reachability to internet through their proxy or some gateway device, they can talk to, they will be able to connect to our relay, which is on the side of the picture, that yellow piece. So the agent will connect to our relay, and the Azure row, the VM instance, will do the same. It will also connect to that relay. So in the relay, we connect the two peers together. So once it's connected, once you have that tunnel through the relay, the communication are truly end-to-end IPsec. And like I said, all the IPsec detail are completely transparent to you. It's hidden for you. And last thing to mention here is the DNS resolution should just work. So in the Azure machine, you can refer to your SQL Server on-prem. Let's say it's SQL 123, and then you specify that in your web configure file. It should just work. Right? It should work with short name or FQDN. Both should work, and vice versa. Your MySQL machine can actually refer to any Azure machine by its name. So now I'm going to talk about, just provide more detail about each step I mentioned earlier. Right? So remember I said the first step is to enable Azure Connect for the Azure row. And to do that, for the web and the worker row, you do it through the CS dev file. When you say include Azure Connect, it basically includes a plugin. So plugin is a concept that Azure has to add an extra component into the web row. So that's the same way how Azure enables, let's say, remote desktop. Let's say your Azure row coming up, you want to be able to remote desktop into it. And that's how it gets enabled. Or if I want to install MOM agent or SCOM agent onto the Windows Azure row, you also do it through the plugin. Right. So plugin is just concept. It should be hidden from you, and all you need to do is specify that one-line XML tag, say include Windows Azure Connect. And for the VM row is another relatively new concept, right? It basically say I want to create a row based on a VHD image. Okay, so let's say you have a bunch of application that you need. It must be on a VHD. Every VM instance spin off that VHD must have those applications. So the way to do that is you use a VM row. You prepare a VHD first, then you sysrep it and you upload it to Windows Azure. So for VM row, you need to install that Connect agent on the VHD first. Then you sysrep it. You do, let's say, sysrep/generalize. You will get the VHD image. And you upload that VHD image to Windows Azure. Then you create Azure VM row using that VHD template. So either it's web row or worker row or VM row. Once the Azure Connect is enabled, when the row is coming up, it's basically when the VM instance is spinning up, the Azure Connect agent should be automatically installed. and activate it, and should be able to ready to do connectivity. So once the CS dev file has that one-liner there, in the CS-CFG file, it will create a few configuration for Azure Connect. And again, it's just a list of XML tags. And probably out of those like 10 configuration tags, only one of them is required. The rest are just optional, depends on what you want to do. And so the only thing required to configure is called activation token. And the activation token is basically a random string. It's a per subscription unique random string that you can get from the Azure admin portal. And you just put in the CSFG. So when the agent come up, it will use that activation token to securely associate itself with your own subscription. Right? So if I am Coke, I have a subscription with Azure, I want my agent to report to me into my subscription, not to Pepsi. So the second step is to install agent on the on-premises machine. Right? So to do that, you install a agent on the machine you want to do external connectivity. And there are really two mechanisms to do that. The simple one is through the web-based installation link. And that is something you can get in your admin portal. Right, so in the admin portal, you say get installation link. Then you can email that installation link to other people in your company. And the guy ready to install just need to click that install link. You can do it, launching the browser or just click on it. It will launch installation. The installation is very simple. It's just one-click install. It doesn't ask any question. It's just install the agent onto your machine. The activation token is actually embedded in the URL. So after the installation is complete, agent will be able to retrieve that token and use it to activate itself. The second mechanism is you can deploy the Connect agent as a standalone package. And this is useful if you want to install the Connect agent onto, let's say, multiple machines. And if you want to do it through the standard software distribution mechanism, for example, SCCM, or even third party like IBM Tivoli or CA Unicenter, you can use the standard tool to distribute a package and get them automatically installed. Then you can author a login script or group policy to push the activation token to the registry of those targeted machines. So again, after the installation, the agent will be able to retrieve the activation token from the registry and use that to activate itself. So what's in the agent, right? After the agent is installed, what's in it? Essentially, it has two components. Okay, the first component is a little client UI that you can see. It's a system tray icon. And the second piece is a Windows service. So the client UI, basically can show you the activation status, or if it's connected, or if it's disconnected. And you can also do diagnostics. So if you think something is wrong or some configuration is not right, you can click it to say diagnostic. So it will run a set of known checks and provide you some feedback and actionable items so you can diagnostic what's going on. And you can also use the client UI to refresh policy. Let's say you change the policy, row B no longer connects to database, and row B now need to connect to the dev machine. So after you do that, you can use the agent UI to refresh that policy. And if you don't do that, it's also okay because every few minutes, the agent automatically trying to get the latest policy. And the second piece is a standard Windows service running in the background on the machine. So it does a few things. It sets up a virtual NIC on the machine. And that virtual NIC has an IPv6 address that we assign to it. And all the connect traffic are going through that virtual NIC. The agent also automatically dials out to our relay in the internet and to form that secure tunnel and maintain that secure tunnel. And also, based on the connectivity policy, the agent configures the IPsec policy, the IPsec association with its peers. It also does the DNS, right, so make sure the name lookup is okay. And lastly, I also mentioned it automatically syncs with our backend to retrieve the latest policy. So now you enabled Connect on Azure Row, and you enabled Connect on the local machines. Right? How do you go by manage the policy? So first thing to call out, all the policy management is through the admin portal. We do have plan to publish API, so anything you do through the portal can be also automatically done using RESTful API or using PowerShell later. And each agent can only belong to one subscription, right? So that's one limitation to call out. So if you install agent and you want your web row or work row to access that SQL server, which is fine, but you cannot share that SQL server with agent on there with another subscription, right? So everything is within the same subscription. For the local computers, you just need to move them to groups. You can create arbitrary groups, right? So you put your SQL server into SQL server group, put your laptop into laptop groups, or you have other project full group. The constraint here is one computer can only belong to one group at one time. Another thing to call out is the newly activated computer is in a state, by default is in a state called unassigned, meaning it doesn't have any connectivity, right? Until the administrator explicitly move it to a group. Only at that time, and only when that group is linked with Azure Row and or linked with other group, only at that time, that machine will start to get connectivity. And once you say the Azure Row and the groups are connected, effectively that means every VM instance in that Azure Row and all the machines in that group are connected. And the experience is, it should feel like they are as if they are on the same LAN. Another thing to call out here is you cannot use Windows Azure Connect to do inter-row connections or intra-row connections. Right? And the reason for that is Azure already give you a mechanism to express that kind of connectivity. So we did it on purpose. We try not to interfere with the existing model. So the connect is used for external connectivity, or used for connecting two external groups together. But it should not be used for inter-row connectivity or intra-row connectivity. And lastly, I want to emphasize that you can connect external group. So you can sort of like bypass Azure. You can, if you have if you have a roaming laptop group and you have a server group, and they are all local, and maybe they're in two network, and you can just connect them. Like right now, I have my machine, which I will run my demo on. It's in a group called the roaming laptop, and I have 2 servers in my office back in Redmond, and I'm having Azure Connect agent on both of them. And I set in the admin UI to connect my roaming laptop to my server group. So effectively, I'm actually having a VPN. I can use that machine to connect all the way back to my server. And my servers are behind Microsoft firewalls and NAT devices. Right. So this is one of the extra benefit Azure Connect brings. Just to mention quickly that another way to achieve the scenario I just talked about, I can actually put my roaming laptop into the same group where my servers are at. Right? Then once they are in the same group, there's a group property called interconnect. So if you check that, it allows all the machines in the same group to be able to connect to each other. And by default, if you don't check this box, although they are in the same group, there is no connectivity between them. So this is just a big example illustrating some of the things I talked about. So on the Azure side, you can enable Connect for row A and enable Connect agent for row B, and you form my server group and my laptop group, and row A can connect to my server and my laptop, but row B can only connect to my laptop group. So the policy is quite granular. And within row A, when the VM instance coming up, let's say today I have 3 VM instances, and let's say next week my traffic increase, I need to spin more instance. When a new instance come up, right, let's say I increase from 3 to 6. When a new instance come up, they should already have the Azure Connect configured, installed, and ready to connect to my server group and my laptop group. Right? There's no extra work you need to do. Okay, so what is the network model for Connect, right? So once you install the agent, once they are configured to connect to each other, what are the connectivity things going on the agent? So first of all, once they have the ability, they are configured to connect, the only requirement is that agent needs to be able to reach out to internet. We go out to the internet to our relay using outbound HTTPS. So as long as the outbound HTTPS is allowed in your company, those endpoints, those Connect endpoints should be able to participate in the Connect. And like I said, the agent will set up a virtual adapter, and all the Connect traffic will flow through this Connect adapter. So you can think that as a new network. So it's as if you plug in a new network cable, or like you add a new NIC onto the machine. So it's totally additive. It should not impact your existing connectivity and network, your infrastructure at all. And so it should be totally orthogonal. It's as if we give you a virtual overlay. It's a separate network to bring all the Connect agent together so they can communicate within that virtual overlay. So as I said, all the connectivity are end-to-end IPsec using a certificate. So the IPsec policy is narrowly scoped to the virtual adapt I was just talking about. So it should not interfere with your existing IPsec policy or whatsoever. And we manage all the IPsec aspects behind the scene, including the certificate management. So the creating the certificate, store the certificate securely, roll over the certificate. We manage all those things behind scene for you. And as I mentioned earlier, the DNS name resolution should just work. Right? Your Azure machine can reference the on-premise machine by name and vice versa. For folks who are interested in knowing how we did that, we are doing it through NSP, it's name service provider. So it's basically a little plugin into the WinSock layer, and it should be able to detect any name lookup request. So when your application want to want to look up some on-prem server name, we detect that and we look up, see if that's a Connect machine. If it is, we give the IPv6 address to the application. If it's not, the Windows OS will take care of the rest. Okay, so we covered most about the connectivity aspect of Windows Azure Connect. I want to emphasize on one feature about Windows Azure Connect. And it allows you to domain join your Azure role to the on-premise AD. And we think that is a very powerful feature. It enables a lot of scenarios. I will touch on some of the scenarios got enabled by this feature. So the process to enable domain join is also very simple. So first, you need to install Connect agent on the domain controller. Right? So if you have, let's say, multiple DCs in your environment, our guidance would be you create a site, you maybe put a few DC in there, in that particular site, then you install Connect agent on them. And the second piece is you enable Connect on the Azure role who wants to domain join. And now in the configuration setting, you just need to add a few things so that the Connect agent knows how to domain join. So you basically provide the domain credentials to the configuration file. And that domain credential needs to have permission to domain join, of course. It's the same thing you do today when you domain join a machine on CorpNet. You can specify an OU path in the configuration file. The idea is you want to say, hey, all my Azure machines should be in one specific OU container, right? So it's easier for me to manage them and to see them. So you can do that. And the third thing is you can specify a list of domain users or groups to be in the administrator group of the Azure machine, right? So I want to log into Azure machine. I want to access Azure machine. What sort of identity should I use? Should I create new ones? No. Right? I already have existing AD identity. I just want to reuse them. And that's how you do it. And so once you have those things configured on the DC and on the Azure role, and you just go to the admin UI to link the two pieces, right? Just the same thing I showed you guys earlier. And after that point, when the Azure will come up, it will automatically domain join to the on-prem machine. So one thing to call out here, the domain joined Azure role instance is not equivalent to its cousin on-premises. And the reason is today, the Azure VM instance doesn't guarantee the persistent local storage, right? So once you are domain joined, your Active Directory domain controller will push a lot of settings onto you, right? It gives you some configuration settings. but Azure doesn't guarantee those changes are persistent across, like let's say this VM is deleted, then a new one created. Those states are not persistent. So you shouldn't think about managing those VM instances the same way you would have managing the AD version of those machines. So what is the primary reason for domain join? We think the primary reason for domain join is so that application can reuse the identity, can reuse the AD identity when they access the Azure machine. So let's go through some top scenario using Windows Azure Connect. It's not a complete list, but those are the top scenarios. The first scenario would be my Windows Azure role need to access on-premise SQL Server, because I don't want to migrate SQL Server to the cloud yet. This is by far the most popular use case. And it has different variations, right? Let's say the Azure role needs to access a file share, or it needs to access a line of business application. The second scenario is really domain join. Like I spoke earlier, let's say you want a remote desktop into Windows Azure role. Right now you can just use existing domain account to log on. And if your application requires user to log in this case, the user can just provide its domain credential to log into your application. And the third one will be it also allows the Azure application, the Azure role, to run under some domain account. Right? So if you combine this scenario with the SQL scenario, let's say you can configure the Azure role to access the SQL Server using Windows Integrate Auth only, right? Without using the SQL Auth, which is considered as less secure. Other scenarios are like remote PowerShell. I want to manage the Azure machine using remote PowerShell. I want to do, I want to access some file share. I want to read event log. Or even I want to do remote debugging. Right? So all those scenarios open up. And lastly is something I talked about, the VPN as a service. And surprisingly, a lot of people actually using Windows Azure Connect for this scenario. It's sort of funny they bypassed Azure completely and they just use it as an easy setup, very easy to use VPN. So if you go to the internet and you do a search for easy VPN or Windows Azure Connect VPN, you actually see so many blog posts and people share their discovery how to use Windows Azure Connect as a simple, very simple to set up VPN. Okay, so at this point, I will do a demo. So, but before I jump into the demo, I want to provide some context about this demo. So let's imagine there's a company called mycontoso.com. Okay, it has a line of business application called a customer search. The customer search is just a simple web application, allows the salespeople in Contoso to query customer information. And today, that whole application is hosted in Contoso.com's own data center. Right? It's a multi-tiered application, has a bunch of IIS servers at the front, need to connect back to the SQL Server where the customer data resides. They lock down the SQL Server to use Windows Integrate Auth only. Right? So because that, you have to configure the IIS application pool to use a specific domain credential to access the SQL Server. And on top of that, the application also needs to write log files to a network file share. And on the operation side, they're administrator, and some of them are roaming. They're off premises. they need to access those servers using the AD credential. And from time to time, they have to manage the machine using remote PowerShell, okay? So let's say today, Contoso.com is considering moving the application to Windows Azure. But they want to move it in a staged fashion. They want to move it in a way that the IIS portion or the web portion is in Windows Azure. But all the dependency on premise components should stay the same, right? So in that way, it requires minimum change in their infrastructure, no change to the code, no change to the security model, and no change to the application configuration. So that's where Windows Azure Connect comes in, right? So you would enable the web role for Connect, then you enable the servers on-prem for Connect. Then you just link them, and all those scenarios can be accomplished. Okay, so what you are seeing here is the customer search web role that Contoso.com has. So what I have here is Visual Studio, and I installed SDK 1.4 on it. So to enable, the very first step, remember, is to enable Windows Azure role for Connect. So to do that, you just need to bring up its property page. In the property page, there is a tab called Virtual Network. And all you need to do is to make that check, activate Windows Azure Connect, and then provide the activation token in the text area. You can get that activation token in the Windows Azure portal. If all you need to do is to enable the role, you are done. That's all you need to do. Right? But in our demo, it's a little more than that because we want a domain join. So to do that, we need to do a little bit more configuration in the CSCFG file. So as you can see, there are about like 10 settings for Windows Azure Connect. The activation token is already done by Visual Studio. Right? So to domain join, you need to provide a few more settings. So I highlight those settings here. All right, so first of all, you need to say enable domain join to true. All right, so the agent knows I need to domain join. And you need to specify the domain controller or the DNS name of the domain, the DC, and you need to specify an account which is with the credential has the permission to domain join. The password of that account is encrypted using a certificate. We have a tool, we have a PowerShell tool for you to do that. Basically, you provide your password to the PowerShell tool, and it will spit out the encrypted version of that password in base64, and you can cut and paste it there. You can specify a OU for your, as a container for your cloud machine if you want to. And as I said, you can specify an existing AD users as administrator. You can provide multiple of them using comma to separate them. So here I specify corp4/JSON, and I will show you in the demo that I will actually use this credential to domain join, to access the cloud machine. And that's all you need to do for configure domain join. So remember I said I need to configure my application pool and to use a specific domain account to access my SQL server, right? So here is the setting. So again, I highlight the wrong thing, it's here. Okay. So app pool username. So again, I provide a domain username. So after that, the VM instance would use that account to access SQL Server. So how do I do that, right? So I cannot configure my app pool until the machine is domain joined. So there is a little synchronization you have to do. So to do that, it's actually very simple. You do have to write one line of code, just one line in my sample. All right, so in the webrow.cs and in the onStart routine, you basically call that one-liner. We actually publish that utility. That function I'm calling right now is packaged as a utility. It's published in our blog, so anyone can use it if you ever have the need to wait for connect to come up, wait for the domain join to finish before you want to do something. So that wait routine and that config app pool routine is all packaged and published. So we can take a quick peek what that function is doing. Right? So it basically say, hey, if the machine, the VM instance is domain joined or not. If it's not, let me wait for 5 more seconds. If it is, then I'm going to call the appcmd command to configure the application pool of IIS to use the domain identity you specified in CSCFG. Okay, so that's basically it. That's the little configuration and the little coding you have to do. And after that, you just recompile, rebuild, and you go publish. You just publish your Azure row as a pack. There's a question.
Sorry, I'm not a developer. What was the SDK? I know what an SDK is. What was the SDK?
Oh, it's the SDK is Windows Azure SDK. That's where you see all those. No, it's not specific to Connect. So the Windows Azure SDK is something that you use. Let's say when you write a .NET application, right? You call the Windows Azure SDK, then you recompile, then your application understand how to live inside Windows Azure. And the little code I mentioned here is published as a blog post, and you can just cut and paste into the code you are running in, most likely the ASP.NET code, and you can just reuse that. And that piece of code is also not specific for Connect, but it knows how to wait for the connectivity to come up. Okay, so what you are looking at right now here is the Windows Azure portal. Okay, so I am already logged in, and I'm in the Hosted Service tab. So here, as you can see under My Subscription, I have the Customer Search web row. Right? And that web row has 2 instances. Right, so it's already running. I already deployed the row to Windows Azure just to save some time. So let me just hit that website. Okay, so when I hit that website, it would generate some traffic to my SQL Server. So essentially, when I hit that website, the ASP page runs a SQL query against my database in my office and bring the result back here. If Connect is not there, there's no way these 2 pieces would connect. You would see an ASP.NET error on that page. Right? Now, because now the machines are connected and at a lower level, you run the application, it's as if they are running on the same lane. So as you can see, I printed out a few things. The data source is actually pointing to a machine called a JSON CHE 2K8 X64, which is a SQL server running in my office. behind the Microsoft firewalls and NAT devices. And also, I printed out twice. I printed out the IPv6 address assigned to that virtual NIC on my SQL Server machine, and that is the virtual NIC has all the connect traffic running through. So how I made that happen? What kind of Azure Connect configuration I have to do? So let's go back to this virtual network tab. So essentially, here you can see the same information about the customer search web row you just saw in the hosted web page. Right? It's the same row with two instances. Actually, just by looking at the name of the machine, of the instance name of the instance, you can see that's actually already domain joined because the machine name has a domain suffix. Right? I call my domain, which the domain controller is in my office, call it contoso.com. So this is the web row that has the Connect enabled. And what I did is I created another local group called my server. And in that local group, I put two endpoints in that. One of them is my SQL Server. I installed an agent on it. And another is my domain controller. I also installed a Connect on it. And I bring these two machines as a member of my server. And then I ask this server to connect to the customer web row. And actually, I have another group for my laptop, for my roaming machine. So my server also connect to my roaming laptop, which is in my roaming group. Okay, so just remember the picture I showed you guys earlier. So it's effectively doing the same thing here. Very simple to set up. That's all you have to do. You save the policy and you are done. And after that point, the agent will automatically pick up that policy and start connectivity. So let's go back to the hosted service. Right? So now the machine is domain joined. I want to show you that I can remote desktop into the Azure machine using the domain credential. And the domain credential I specified is called for JSON. Okay, I'm logged in, right? So I'm going to, let's say, computer property, right? So as you can see, the computer name has a domain suffix in there, so it's already domain joined to my on-premise AD. Let's try another thing. Let's say, who am I? So I'm logged in as corp4json. Let's see if I can access my machine back in my office. All right, so I exposed a network file share on my on-premise machine. Right, so I'm able to reach to actually my Azure application already wrote a log file back to my on-prem machine. And let's check the IIS application pool. Boom, here, right? So it is configured right now to use the identity corp4/JSON, which is specified in the CSCFG file. Okay, so let's go back to the machine in my office. So this is the SQL Server machine. And as you can see, this is Contoso.com's customer search database. And I'm on the SQL Server right now. So I want to show you guys that in the event log, just to see who accessed the SQL Server and using which account. So at 10:59, so this is Redmond time, so you add 3 hours, right? So it's about 1:59, so just, a couple minutes ago. There is a SQL logging event. The identity provided is corp4JSON. And that machine who connected to me is using a IPv6 address, and that's IPv6 address we assign to the VM. So another thing I can show you is, let's say I'm using that SQL Server. I want to launch a remote PowerShell into Windows Azure machine. So I can do things like, let's say, $computer name equal to, let's find the computer name. Let's say I want to launch a remote PowerShell into this row instance. I'm just going to use its short name, and I do a cut and paste of its name. Let me put it in quotes just to be sure. So now I can say enter PS session dash computer $computer name dash. Okay, so I'm trying to establish a remote power session into the Azure machine and using my AD credential. And it usually takes probably around 10 seconds to establish the remote PowerShell. Okay, so I'm in, right? So if you look at a host name, and as you see the RD blah, 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 that is the name given for the VM instance running in Windows Azure. So I can do cool things like, get process, what are the things running on my Azure machine. Okay, so as you can see, using Connect and using the domain join feature, a lot of the scenarios can be satisfied. A lot of the scenario can be enabled. And everything that Contoso.com requires can be now satisfied. Okay, so I want to touch a little bit on the considerations for using Connect. Right? So first of all, what is the appropriate scenario for using Windows Azure Connect, right? Do you just want a connectivity at data layer, at application layer, or you really want a connectivity at a machine level and at IP level? So different connectivity technology have different use, so make sure you choose the right one. And at this point, it is an agent-based solution, so you do have to install agent on the machine. So the platform we support are Vista and Win 7 on the client side and Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 on the server side. And deployment topology, right? So we require agent to be installed on Connect. Connect agent needs to be installed on the local computers. One thing to call out is that I have customer ask me that what if I have bunch of a machine behind a F5 device, behind a load balance device, which has a virtual IP address. So today, Azure Connect cannot do that because it's a true end-to-end model. And you would be able to connect to the machine behind that F5 device, but we have no way knowing the virtual IP address. Okay, and that's something we are working on, and hopefully pretty soon we can provide a solution to this problem. And lastly, I want to mention the performance. So folks always ask me, what is the performance? What's the latency and bandwidth provided by Connect? So essentially, the biggest, the primary factor for determining your performance, latency, and bandwidth is how good your internet connectivity to and from the relay. Right? So it's law of physics. Your internet is good, then your throughput and latency will be good. Right? We add very minimum overhead to the connection. And other things folks need to be aware is it's a distributed application. Before, although it's distributed, but everything is in the local LAN. Now you move a part to Azure and another part stay on premises. There is a big internet in between. So there are things you should be aware, such as make your application less chatty. Right? So if you don't have to send a lot of traffic over, you probably shouldn't. And if they are static image or static data, make sure you cache them or you put them in storage. You don't have to retrieve them dynamically. Right. And I would just say for performance, the guidance will be try it out. Once you try it out, you will find out a lot of improvement you can do to your application and to make that distribution application work more efficiently and with minimum latency. Okay, so let me touch upon the roadmap. So Azure Connect has been in CTP since last year. Anyone can get access. You just log on to Windows Azure portal, ask for access. Depends on the time you request access. Within 1 day to 7 days, you will get an email from the Azure support team, and your subscription will be enabled for Windows Azure Connect, and you can try it out. It's totally free at this point. We made 2 CTP refresh, once in March and once in May. We added a bunch of new features. One is multi-admin support. So now you can delegate different admins to manage Azure Connect. We have improved our client UI and diagnostics. We added support to non-English OS. We also added new relays to Asia and Europe. And our European customers are very happy about that because if they use the US relay, the latency will be a little bigger. Now they can just choose to use the Europe relay. And remember the activation token I was talking about? So now you can also use certificate-based activation. If you are security-minded, this basically gives you the option to deploy a certificate onto the local machine. And when you activate, we will validate that certificate is valid before we let the machine go activate. So by the time we go production, we will provide more relays, and we will also publish client update to Windows, to Microsoft Update. So you can use Microsoft Update to automatically service the agent, and you can also use things like a WSUS to do servicing for your agent. We plan to release the SDK. Everything you do for Connect, create group, move machine to the group, can be also done via the REST API. And over time, we will also add UDP-based relays. So I'm running out of time. Just very quick, I just want to touch one more thing. So today the solution is agent-based, but we also hear customers saying, especially some larger customer or some customer already have VPN device, and they're very familiar with the model for site-to-site VPN. They want a model that is very similar to Amazon VPC. That is, they want Azure to host a gateway, and that gateway can connect to their on-premise VPN. So now the two clouds are connected using a site-to-site VPN. So the downside for this model is you need to coordinate with your network admin and to set up that VPN device. But I mean, the upside is you don't have to install agent on every resource you plan to have connectivity. So in closing, I just want to emphasize again, Windows Azure Connect enables the hybrid scenario. So now you can move your application to Windows Azure, but leave some portion of the application running in your own data center. Get onto Windows Azure Connect, get onto the portal request CTP, and there is a team blog. We write new features, and we write guidance how to use it. And if you have questions, and there is an MSDN forum for Windows Azure Connect, you can just send your question. And I monitor this forum most of the time, and I usually replies. So that's it. Hopefully, this is useful to folks, and I'll be around a little longer. So if you have questions, feel free to come over. I'll be answering those questions for you guys. And please fill out evaluation form, and that's a way to let Microsoft know your feedback, and that's a way for me to know how to improve my future talks. Okay, thank you very much, folks. Thank you for coming.